The moment I realized I wasn't alone, it was already too late. I was sitting in my living room, the TV muted, just staring at my phone. It was that heavy, hollow time of night where the world feels like it stopped. I've lived here long enough to know every idiosyncrasy of this house. The pipes, the settling wood, the way the wind catches the kitchen window. But the silence that night was different. It wasn't empty. It felt expectant, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to notice something. Then I heard it. My name, called softly from the hallway. It sounded so familiar, so much like someone I loved and trusted, that I didn't even hesitate. I didn't look up. I just let out a quiet, "Yeah," and waited. It's never the same twice. That's the detail that starts to eat at you. One night it's your mother's voice, soft and tired, calling from the kitchen while you're alone upstairs. The next, it's a friend you haven't seen in years, laughing just outside the bedroom door. Sometimes, it's your own voice, a dry cough or a subconscious hum that you know your own throat didn't produce. It only happens when the house is perfectly still, when you're distracted by a screen or drifting into that vulnerable space before sleep. You never hear footsteps. You never hear the floorboards groan under the weight of a physical body. There are no doors clicking shut or curtains rustling. It is just there. A weight in the air that occupies the space right behind your shoulder, always retreating the second you shift your gaze. Your phone starts to glitch in the small hours. The audio on your videos cuts to static or high-pitched hums. You try to record the room, but the playback is always a flat, dead void that feels heavier than the noise itself. Then, without any warning, it all stops. The voices go away. The house feels normal again. But you don't feel relieved. Your stomach drops because you realize the silence isn't a return to peace. It's the feeling of a predator going quiet. It's the realization that it has finished its rehearsal. It isn't calling out to find you anymore. It knows exactly where you are. You tell yourself you're just tired. You blame the blue light from your phone, the stress of the week, or the way the coffee you drank too late makes your pulse thrum in your ears. But the logic starts to peel away at the edges like old wallpaper. You begin waking up at 3 in the morning, not because of a noise, but because the air in your bedroom feels thick, as if someone has been leaning over your bed, staring at your closed eyelids for hours, waiting for a flicker of movement. You don't open your eyes. You stay paralyzed, buried under the covers, until the sun bleeds through the curtains. But even then, the relief doesn't come. The exhaustion isn't in your muscles anymore. It's in your bones. You start to notice subtle distortions in the mundane. You're brushing your teeth, looking at the steam on the glass, and you see a fingerprint that isn't yours, except it is. It's your exact whirl, your exact size, but you haven't touched that part of the mirror. The movement in your periphery becomes a constant, suffocating companion. It isn't a shadow or a blur. It's a flicker of an expression. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a darkened window and your reflection is staring back with an intensity that makes your stomach turn. A look of hungry, curious observation. It's like something is studying the way your eyes crinkle when you're afraid, or how your mouth twitches when you're trying not to cry. It's practicing. You can feel it in the way the air shifts when you walk into the kitchen, a subtle displacement, a lingering warmth in a chair you haven't sat in yet. You stop trusting your own senses. You hear your own breathing, but it sounds slightly out of sync with the rise and fall of your chest. You find yourself stopping in the middle of a room, heart hammering, because you realize you were listening for the house to make a sound, and instead, you heard the house listening to you. The boundaries of your privacy have been breached, not by a break-in, but by a presence that has woven itself into the very rhythm of your life. You aren't just living in your house anymore. You're being watched from inside your own habits. You start digging through the corners of the internet, not looking for ghost stories, but for confirmation that you aren't losing your mind. You find them in archived threads and anonymous confessions, people describing the exact same sequence of events. It's never a scream or a demand. It's always a question. A name. A familiar inflection that bypasses your logic and hits your instinct. The pattern is sickeningly consistent across every story. Different cities, different languages, but the same mechanics of intrusion. That's when you finally see the name someone attached to it, written so casually it makes your skin crawl. The mimic. Once the word is in your head, everything you've been experiencing snaps into a terrifying focus. It isn't an intruder trying to break down your door. It's much more patient than that. It doesn't need to force its way in because it's waiting for you to invite it. Every time you answered the voice in the hallway, every time you muttered a response to the whisper in the dark, you were handing it a piece of yourself. You realize now that it wasn't trying to scare you. It was waiting for you to validate its existence, and by speaking back, you gave it exactly what it needed to stop being a sound and start being a reality. The fear doesn't feel like a cold sweat anymore. It's a slow, heavy sinking in your chest. You realize this wasn't some random haunting or a stroke of bad luck. It was targeted. It looked for the gaps in your guard, the moments when you were too tired to think, too comfortable to doubt, or too lonely to stay silent. You replay every single time you answered without thinking. Every "yeah" or "who is it" was a signature on a contract you never read. Every time you spoke back, you were giving it more material, more nuance, more of your own essence to chew on. You stopped talking altogether. Not just to the house, but to the world. You're afraid that if you speak, you'll hear your own voice echo back from a corner where no one should be. Or worse, you'll hear yourself say something you didn't intend. You avoid mirrors because the person looking back seems to be waiting for you to blink first, studying the way your pupils dilate in the dim light with a clinical, hungry interest. You stop calling your friends by their names. You realize names have power, and you've been throwing yours around like it didn't matter, handing out keys to your identity to a thief you couldn't even see. This is the point where the stories you read stop being entertainment and start being a mirror. You aren't afraid of the mimic as an external threat anymore. You're afraid of how natural its voice sounds now. You're afraid because when you hear it call your name from the other room, it doesn't sound like a monster pretending to be human. It sounds more human than you feel. You start to wonder if the silence in the house is because it's gone, or because it has finally finished its work. You feel like a guest in your own life, sitting in a chair that doesn't feel like yours anymore, waiting for the real owner to walk in and use your voice to tell you to leave. The dread is no longer a shadow. It's the realization that the shadow has learned how to breathe. It's the curiosity that finally breaks you. You tell yourself it's a test, a way to reclaim your space, but deep down, you just need to know if you're still the one in control. You wait until the house is suffocatingly still, your back turned to the open doorway. You don't scream. You don't even use a full voice. You just let out a single fragile whisper, a question you shouldn't have asked. The answer doesn't come from the shadows or the next room. It comes from the inch of space right behind your neck. It's your voice, but it's more than a recording. It's the exact tremor of your vocal cords, the specific way your breath hitches before you speak, the very heat of your own lungs. It's so perfect that for a split second, you aren't sure which one of you actually spoke. A strange, hollow recognition washes over you, more chilling than any scream could ever be. You realize then that it wasn't trying to sound like you anymore. It was waiting.